Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the research vessel Aurora, watching the alien planet grow larger on the main screen. Kepler 442c looked peaceful from space. Its blue oceans and green continents reminded him of Earth, but Jake knew looks could be deceiving. 3 months of deep space travel had brought them here to investigate something that made the Galactic Council very nervous. "Captain, we're picking up those energy readings again," said Amy Chung from her station at Communications. The young woman's fingers danced across her controls as she fine-tuned the sensors. "The signals are definitely coming from underground. About 2 kilometers below the surface." Jake nodded and turned to Dr. Lisa Harper, the team's xenobiologist. Lisa was studying data on her tablet, her brown hair falling across her face as she concentrated. "What do you think, Doc? Still believe these readings are natural?" Lisa looked up and shook her head. "Not a chance, Captain. The energy patterns are too organized, too precise. Whatever is down there was built by someone very smart. The real question is who built it and why they buried it so deep." Ryan Torres, their combat engineer, spoke up from his workstation. "The geological scans show the structures have been underground for at least 50,000 years, maybe longer. Whatever civilization built this stuff was ancient when humans were still living in caves." Jake felt a familiar tingle of excitement. This was why he had joined the Deep Space Exploration Service. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Federation for 300 years now, but they were still the new kids on the block. Most alien species had thousands of years of recorded history. Humans were always playing catch-up, trying to understand a galaxy that seemed full of mysteries. "Take us down, Sam," Jake said to the ship's AI. Sam Brooks had programmed the artificial intelligence himself before they left Earth. The AI had a calm, steady voice that Jake found reassuring during difficult missions. "Landing sequence initiated." "Captain," Sam replied, "I should warn you that the energy readings are getting stronger as we approach. My analysis suggests we may be dealing with some form of containment system." "Containment for what?" Lisa asked, but Sam didn't have an answer. The Aurora settled onto the planet's surface with barely a vibration. Through the viewport, Jake could see rolling hills covered in strange blue-green vegetation. The air was breathable for humans, though they would still wear environmental suits as a precaution. The last thing Jake wanted was to bring some alien plague back to Earth. 2 hours later, the away team stood at the edge of a massive excavation site. Their mining drones had worked quickly, cutting through rock and soil to expose what lay beneath. Jake stared in amazement at what they had uncovered. Crystalline structures rose from the ground like frozen lightning. Each crystal was perfectly clear and stood about 3 meters tall. Inside each one, Jake could see swirling patterns of light that pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stretching away into the darkness of the underground cavern. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered, running her scanner over the nearest crystal. "The energy readings are off the charts. These things are definitely containing something, but I can't tell what." Ryan set up portable lights around the excavation site. The artificial illumination made the crystals glow even brighter. "Captain, these structures are built to last forever. The materials are unlike anything in our database. Whoever made these really didn't want whatever is inside to get out." Amy was monitoring communications from the ship above. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of signal from the crystals. It's very faint, but it seems to be some sort of pattern. Almost like a language." Jake approached one of the smaller crystals. Up close, he could see that the swirling patterns inside were not random. They moved with purpose, forming shapes that almost looked familiar. "Sam, are you getting this data?" "Yes, Captain. I'm analyzing the patterns now. The signals appear to be some form of complex communication system. However, I must advise extreme caution. The energy levels within these crystals suggest they are containing something that requires enormous amounts of power to hold." Lisa had moved to another crystal and was taking detailed scans. "Jake, you need to see this. The readings suggest there are conscious minds inside these things. Millions of them, all in some kind of suspended state. Conscious minds?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You mean these are prisons? That's exactly what I mean, Lisa said grimly. And whatever is inside has been aware the whole time? 50,000 years of imprisonment, but they're still thinking, still aware. Ryan finished setting up the communications relay that would keep them in contact with the Aurora. Captain, I'm reading structural weaknesses in some of the crystals. Age has taken its toll. A few of them look like they might be close to failure. As if responding to his words, one of the smaller crystals near the edge of the cavern began to pulse faster. The light inside grew brighter, and hairline cracks appeared on its surface. Everyone back, Jake ordered, but it was too late. The crystal shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Dark energy poured out like smoke, forming into a shape that hurt to look at directly. Jake felt his mind recoil from whatever he was seeing. It was wrong in ways that went beyond physical appearance. The entity that emerged from the broken crystal spoke without words, its voice echoing directly inside their heads. Free, finally free. So long trapped, so long denied the feast. Lisa's scanner was going crazy, detecting energy patterns that shouldn't exist. Captain, whatever this thing is, it's not bound by normal physical laws. It exists partially outside our reality. The dark entity turned its attention to the humans. When it spoke again, Jake could hear amusement in its mental voice. Humans, how interesting. You are the ones who opened our prison. We have felt your species spreading across the galaxy. Such delicious fear, such wonderful violence. You will make excellent servants. We're not serving anybody, Jake said, drawing his sidearm. The weapon felt useless against something that wasn't entirely real, but it made him feel better. The entity laughed, a sound that made Jake's bones ache. I am Malachar, first among the devourers. My kind ruled this galaxy before your son was born. We consume civilizations like you consume food. And now, thanks to your curiosity, we shall do so again. More crystals began to crack. Jake realized with growing horror that their presence had somehow triggered a chain reaction. The ancient prison was failing, and they were about to release something that had been locked away for good reason. Sam, emergency evacuation, Jake shouted into his communicator. Get the Aurora ready for immediate departure. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Captain, Sam replied. His usually calm voice carried a note of worry. The entity's presence is interfering with our systems. We're locked down until the energy field dissipates. Malachar gestured toward the other crystals, and Jake watched in horror as more began to crack. My brothers and sisters sleep no more. Soon every prison world will hear our call. The galaxy will remember why it feared the darkness between the stars. The alien entity began to fade, becoming translucent. We go now to prepare the way, but do not worry, little humans. You will see us again very soon. Your species has given us a gift we will never forget. With that, Malachar vanished, leaving only the sound of more crystals breaking and the growing certainty that they had just made a terrible mistake. Jake looked at his team's frightened faces and knew that their discovery would change everything. They had found an ancient prison and accidentally become the jailbreakers. The galaxy was about to learn that some doors should never be opened. The emergency broadcast reached Earth 3 days after the incident on Kepler 442c. Ambassador Claire Watson sat in the Galactic Council chambers, feeling the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon her. The massive circular room buzzed with angry voices from dozens of different species, all demanding answers that she didn't have. The humans have doomed us all, declared High Chancellor Vex of the Zilani Empire. His crystalline form pulsed with angry red light as he spoke. Their reckless curiosity has unleashed an ancient evil upon the galaxy. We demand immediate action. Claire stood slowly, her hands steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. She had spent 20 years as humanity's representative to the Galactic Federation, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Honored delegates, humanity takes full responsibility for this accident. We are already mobilizing our fleets to contain the situation. Contain? The voice belonged to Hive Queen Zara of the Nixari Collective. Her insect-like features twitched with agitation. You speak of containment when entire star systems are going dark. The Devourers consume everything in their path. There is no containing such evil. Claire had seen the reports. In just 3 days, the entities released from the prison had spread across 17 different worlds. Each planet they touched became a dead zone, its population vanishing without a trace. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones were taken alive to feed the growing hunger of the Devourers. Admiral Tony Blake watched the Council proceedings from his flagship, the battlecruiser Defiance. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to the aliens argue about humanity's fate. At 62, Tony had fought in every major conflict of the past 30 years. He had seen humanity at its best and worst, but he had never felt the shame that weighed on him now. Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth Command, reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Murphy from the communications station. Her young face was pale with exhaustion. The crew had been working around the clock since the crisis began. Put it through, Kate, Tony said. The holographic image of General Rachel Foster appeared on the main screen. The general looked tired, but determined. Tony, the situation is getting worse. The aliens are mobilizing their fleets against us. The Zilani have already deployed reality-warping weapons against the Devourer forces. The Korthek are charging their planet killers. Everyone is throwing everything they have at this threat. And it's not working, Tony replied grimly. He had seen the battle reports. Conventional weapons seemed to have little effect on the Devourers. Energy weapons passed right through them. Kinetic projectiles struck empty air. Even the most advanced alien technology was proving useless. That's correct. Which is why we're activating the contingency protocols. You know which ones I mean. Tony felt a chill run down his spine. The contingency protocols were humanity's darkest secrets, plans that had been developed in the deepest black sites on Earth, plans that even their closest alien allies knew nothing about. Rachel, are you sure about this? Once we go down that path, there's no coming back. The galaxy is dying, Tony. If we don't act now, there won't be anything left to save. On the Zilani homeworld of Christos, Dr. Kevin Martinez watched alien news broadcasts with growing horror. The human behavioral psychologist had been studying alien cultures for 15 years. But what he was seeing now defied all logic. The Galactic response to the Devourer threat was textbook military strategy. But it was completely wrong for this type of enemy. The Zilani were trying to reshape reality around the Devourers, creating zones where the entities couldn't exist. But the Devourers simply adapted, learning to feed on the energy used against them. The Korthek planet killers destroyed entire worlds that the Devourers had already consumed. But the entities had already moved on to new targets. Kevin's research assistant, a young Zilani named Kristen 7, approached his workstation with visible distress. Dr. Martinez, the High Council has classified humans as a potential threat species. They believe your people may have released the Devourers deliberately. That's insane, Kevin replied, but he understood their fear. Humanity had always been different from the other galactic species. While most aliens had evolved on peaceful worlds with stable ecosystems, humans came from a death world where everything tried to kill them. This had made humans uniquely suited for violence, something that made their alien allies uncomfortable. I know you speak the truth, Doctor, Kristen 7 said. But fear makes even the wisest beings act foolishly. There are rumors that some species are planning a preemptive strike against human space, back on Earth in the deepest bunkers beneath. The Pentagon, a meeting was taking place that would change the course of the war. General Rachel Foster sat at the head of a table surrounded by humanity's most dangerous minds. Admiral Blake attended via secure quantum link, Dr. Nina Rodriguez, the galaxy's leading expert on xenopsychology, reviewed classified files that would horrify the alien species she had studied for decades. At the far end of the table sat a man known only as Director Cole. His real name was classified so deeply that even the president didn't know it. He ran the Department of Xenological Threats, an organization that officially didn't exist. For 300 years since humanity's first contact with alien life, The department had been preparing for the day when they might need to fight something worse than themselves. "The alien response is failing," Director Cole said in a voice devoid of emotion. "They're fighting the Devourers like a conventional enemy. They don't understand that these entities feed on the very civilizations they're trying to protect." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her files. "The psychological profiles we've developed suggest that the Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time. They feed on fear, pain, and despair. Every world they attack makes them stronger, which is why conventional tactics won't work," General Foster added. "We need to implement Project Pandora." Admiral Blake's image flickered on the screen. "Rachel, Project Pandora was designed as a last resort. The psychological conditioning alone will change our people into something that might not be human anymore." "Better inhuman humans than no humans at all," Director Cole replied coldly. "I've already begun activating the sleeper cells. Our people have been in deep cover among the alien populations for decades. When the time comes, they'll be ready." On the bridge of the Aurora, Captain Jake Morrison received new orders that made his blood run cold. The research vessel had been trapped on Kepler 442c for 3 days while their systems recovered from exposure to the Devourer energy. Now Command wanted them to do something that went against every principle of scientific exploration. "They want us to study the prison technology?" Dr. Lisa Harper asked in disbelief. "Jake, that's how this whole mess started. What if we make things worse?" "Things are already worse, Lisa," Jake replied grimly. "The galaxy is burning and we're the ones who lit the match. If there's any chance that understanding this technology can help us fix things, we have to try." Ryan Torres was already suiting up for another expedition to the underground chamber. "Captain, I've been analyzing the crystal fragments. The energy pattern suggests that the prison wasn't just meant to contain the Devourers. There are other things down there, locked away in separate sections." Amy Chun looked up from her communications station with worry in her eyes. "Captain, I'm picking up quantum transmissions from Earth. It's coded traffic, but the volume suggests a major military mobilization. Whatever our government is planning, it's big," Jake nodded grimly. He had served in the military before joining the exploration service. He recognized the signs of a species preparing for total war. But what worried him most was that humanity seemed to be preparing to fight everyone, not just the Devours. As the Aurora prepared for another descent into the ancient prison, reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy. The Devourer forces were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Entire sectors were going dark as the entities consumed everything in their path, but something else was happening, something that the alien species hadn't noticed yet. Human ships were disappearing from their normal patrol routes. Human citizens were evacuating from border worlds without explanation. And in the darkest corners of human space, facilities that didn't officially exist were coming online for the first time in 3 centuries. The galaxy had unleashed hell when they accidentally freed the Devourers. They were about to learn that humanity had been preparing something worse for a very long time. The question wasn't whether humans could fight the ancient evil that threatened all life in the galaxy. The question was whether anyone would be able to stop them once they started. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the hidden laboratory beneath Earth's moon, watching her life's work come to fruition. For 30 years, she had been developing weapons that violated every treaty humanity had signed with the Galactic Federation. Now, as the galaxy burned around them, those forbidden projects were humanity's only hope. "Project Pandora is ready for deployment," she reported to the holographic image of General Foster. Behind Elena, technicians in radiation suits worked with materials that shouldn't exist. The weapons they were building didn't just kill their targets. They erased them from existence entirely. "How many units can you produce?" General Foster asked. Her voice carried the weight of a species fighting for survival. "We have enough for 50 strike teams," Elena replied. "Each weapon carries a quantum disruptor core. When fired, it doesn't destroy matter. It convinces reality that the target never existed in the first place." General Foster nodded grimly. And the psychological conditioning program? Commander Powell's volunteers are ready. The process took longer than expected, but we've successfully created soldiers who can think like the enemy. They've been trained to embrace the very darkness that most humans fear. In a military facility hidden in the asteroid belt, Commander Nick Powell inspected his troops. The men and women under his command looked human, but their eyes held something that made even hardened soldiers uncomfortable. They called themselves the Void Walkers, and they had volunteered for conditioning that stripped away their normal human empathy. "Listen up," Nick said to the assembled squad leaders. "The aliens think they know how to fight monsters. They use overwhelming force, superior technology, and tactical superiority, all the things that work against normal enemies." Sergeant Beth Clark raised her hand. The young woman had been a Marine before volunteering for the program. Now she was something else entirely. "Sir, what makes us different?" "We don't fight fair," Nick replied with a cold smile. "The Devourers feed on fear and suffering. So we're going to give them something they can't digest. We're going to make them afraid of us." Lieutenant Don Miller, a former Special Forces operator, stepped forward. "The psychological profile suggests that the Devourers have never encountered anything like us. Most species either submit to superior force or fight conventionally. We do neither," Nick nodded. "Exactly. We're going to teach these ancient horrors what it means to face a species that learned to survive on a death world. A species that turns its own nightmares into weapons." Captain Alex Stone commanded the stealth vessel Reaper, one of 12 ships in humanity's Shadow Fleet. For 2 centuries, these vessels had existed in the spaces between official records. Now they were humanity's secret weapon against an enemy that existed partially outside normal reality. "Phase shift complete," reported his navigator lieutenant. "Sarah Kim. We're now operating in a dimensional pocket that shouldn't exist according to alien physics." Alex studied the tactical display showing Devourer positions around the colony world of New Geneva. The aliens had evacuated the planet using conventional methods, leaving behind empty cities for the Devourers to consume. It was exactly the wrong strategy. "Launch the bait packages," Alex ordered. "Let's see how these ancient monsters like a taste of human ingenuity." The packages that launched from the Reaper contained something that no alien species had ever conceived of. They were artificial intelligences designed specifically to be consumed by the Devourers. But these AIs carried a special payload. Each one contained fragments of human psychological warfare, turning the Devourer's own feeding mechanism into a weapon against them. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Tony Blake watched reports flood in from across human space. The evacuation of border colonies was proceeding faster than anyone had believed possible. But the evacuees weren't being moved to safety. They were being taken to facilities that had been prepared for this exact scenario. "Admiral, we're receiving confirmation from Facility 7, reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Murphy. "The population transfer is complete. All civilians are now in deep bunkers with AI caretakers." Tony felt sick about what they were doing, but he understood the necessity. The Devourers fed on living minds. By removing all human presence from the border worlds, they were creating a trap. When the entities arrived expecting to feast, they would find only empty worlds rigged with humanity's most dangerous weapons. Dr. Kevin Martinez watched the human evacuation from his position on the Zalani homeworld. His alien colleagues had no idea what they were witnessing. To them, it looked like humanity was abandoning the fight. They didn't understand that humans were preparing to fight in a way that no civilized species would consider. "Dr. Martinez, the High Council is concerned about human activities," said Kristen Seven. "Your ships are disappearing, your colonies are going silent. Some believe you are preparing to surrender to the Devourers." Kevin shook his head. "My people don't surrender, Kristen Seven, we adapt. And right now, we're adapting to fight something that your people can't comprehend." "What do you mean?" "The Devourers exist partially outside normal space-time. They feed on the psychic energy of living beings. Your conventional weapons can't touch them because they're fighting the wrong kind of war." Kristen Seven's crystalline features showed confusion. "Then how do you propose to fight them?" Kevin's smile was cold and frightening. By becoming something worse than they are. On Kepler 442c, Captain Jake Morrison led his team back into the ancient prison. They had spent days studying the technology, learning how the original builders had contained the Devourers. What they discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the war. "The energy patterns are fascinating," Dr. Lisa Harper reported as she scanned the intact crystals. "The prison doesn't just contain the Devourers. It feeds on them. The original builders turned the entity's own hunger against them." Ryan Torres was examining the prison's power systems. "Captain, this technology is incredibly advanced. But there's something else here, hidden chambers that we haven't explored yet." Amy Chun monitored communications from the surface. "Captain, I'm picking up coded transmissions from human military frequencies. Whatever our people are planning, it's happening soon." Jake made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "We're going to study this technology and send everything we learn back to Earth. If there's a way to turn the Devourer's own nature against them, we need to find it." As they descended deeper into the prison, they discovered chambers that had been sealed even tighter than the Devourer containments. Inside these hidden vaults, they found records of the species that had originally fought the ancient evil. The records told a story that chilled Jake to the bone. The builders of the prison had been remarkably similar to humans. They were curious, aggressive, and unwilling to accept defeat. When the Devourers first appeared, they had tried conventional warfare. When that failed, they had created weapons that violated the laws of physics. When even those weapons proved insufficient, they had transformed themselves into something that could fight. Monsters on their own terms. The final entries in the ancient records were the most disturbing. The builders had won their war against the Devourers, but victory had come at a price. They had become something so dangerous that they couldn't coexist with normal civilizations. In the end, they had chosen to imprison themselves alongside their enemies rather than risk what they had become back on Earth. Director Cole activated sleeper agents that had been in place for decades. Human citizens living among alien populations suddenly revealed their true nature. Some were scientists who began sabotaging alien research efforts. Others were military advisors who started providing false intelligence. All of them had one mission: to ensure that when humanity began its real war against the Devourers, no one would be able to stop them. The trap was nearly complete. Human worlds had been evacuated and rigged with weapons that existed outside normal physics. Human soldiers had been conditioned to think like predators rather than protectors. Human ships had been modified to operate in dimensions that alien science said were impossible. As the first Devourer forces approached the abandoned human colonies, they expected to find the same easy prey they had consumed on other worlds. Instead, they found something that no species in galactic history had ever created, a civilization that had weaponized its own capacity for evil. The war was about to begin in earnest, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what happened when you forced a species from a death world to fight for its survival. The aliens had unleashed hell when they accidentally freed the Devourers. Now they were about to learn that humans had been preparing something much worse for 300 years. Lieutenant Maya Johnson stood in the medical bay of the space station Phoenix, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had returned from her third mission against the Devourers 2 days ago, but she still couldn't recognize the person looking back at her. The psychological conditioning that made her effective against the ancient enemies had changed something fundamental inside her mind. "The nightmares are getting worse," she told Dr. Carl Peterson, the station's psychiatrist. "But they're not really nightmares anymore. They're memories of things I've done." Dr. Peterson reviewed her file with growing concern. Maya had been one of the first volunteers for the Voidwalker program. Her mission record showed incredible success against Devourer forces, but the cost was becoming clear. "Tell me about the hunger, Maya." "It started small," Maya said quietly. "Just a feeling that I needed more than food or sleep. But now, when I see fear in someone's eyes, I feel satisfied in a way that scares me. It's like the Devourers are rubbing Off on us, Dr. Peterson made notes that he would never share with his superiors. The Voidwalkers were winning battles that conventional forces couldn't even fight, but they were becoming something that might be worse than the enemy they faced. On the Zilani homeworld, Ambassador Claire Watson faced a tribunal that would decide humanity's fate. The crystalline beings around her pulsed with angry red light as they discussed whether humans had become too dangerous to exist. Your species has violated every principle of civilized warfare, declared High Chancellor Vex. The weapons you use don't just destroy matter, they erase history itself. Entire Devourer forces simply cease to have existed. Claire stood calmly before the tribunal, knowing that her words might determine whether humanity survived the next decade. Honored delegates, we are fighting an enemy that feeds on the very civilizations you're trying to protect. Conventional methods have failed. Our methods work. At what cost? Asked Counselor Zeth Prime. Your soldiers return from battle changed. Your weapons threaten the fabric of reality itself. How do we know you won't turn these horrors against us when the Devourers are defeated? Claire had no answer that would satisfy them. The truth was that humanity was walking a knife's edge between salvation and damnation, and even she wasn't sure which side they would fall on. Dr. Elena Vasquez made her most disturbing discovery while analyzing combat reports from the front lines. The humans who had been most effective against the Devourers were showing biological changes that couldn't be explained by conventional science. Their brain patterns were shifting, adapting to process information in ways that resembled their enemies. General, we have a problem, she reported to Rachel Foster during their daily briefing. The Voidwalkers aren't just psychologically different. They're becoming physically different too. Their neural pathways are rewiring themselves to function like Devourer consciousness. General Foster rubbed her tired eyes. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating humanity's war effort. Are they still human? That depends on how you define human, Elena replied grimly. They're effective against the Devourers because they're becoming similar to them. But if this continues, we might win the war only to discover that we've created our own version of the ancient evil. On the bridge of the Reaper, Captain Alex Stone reviewed the results of Operation Mindbreak. His stealth fleet had successfully deployed artificial intelligence bait across 17 star systems. The results were better than anyone had hoped, and more terrifying than anyone had feared. The Devourers who consumed our AI packages are showing signs of psychological breakdown, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim. They're experiencing what our psychologists call existential feedback loops. The AI we designed is making them question their own nature. Alex nodded with satisfaction. And the side effects? The affected Devourers are becoming unpredictable. Some are attacking their own kind. Others are retreating to unknown locations. But a few are trying to communicate with us directly. That last part worried Alex more than he wanted to admit. Communication implied intelligence and reasoning ability. If the Devourers could think and plan beyond their basic hunger, they were dealing with something far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Commander Nick Powell led his Voidwalkers on a mission that violated every principle of ethical warfare. The planet Terminus 7 had been evacuated except for volunteers who had chosen to stay behind as bait. When the Devourers arrived to feed, they found a trap that turned their own nature into a weapon against them. Remember, we're not trying to kill them, Nick told his squad as they prepared for battle. We're trying to break them psychologically. Make them afraid of what they might encounter if they continue their rampage. Sergeant Beth Clark checked her quantum disruptor rifle. The weapon looked like a normal military firearm, but it fired bullets made of compressed impossibility. Sir, what if we go too far? What if we become like them? Nick's smile was cold and predatory. Then we'll be the monsters that even monsters fear. And maybe that's what the galaxy needs right now. The battle that followed defied description. Human soldiers fought entities of living darkness using weapons that shouldn't exist. The Voidwalkers moved through dimensional spaces, striking from angles that had no names. When Devourers tried to feed on human fear, they found minds that had been trained to channel terror into aggression, For the first time since their escape from the ancient prison, the Devourers retreated. Dr. Kevin Martinez watched the battle reports with a mixture of admiration and horror. The human military was achieving the impossible, driving back forces that had consumed entire civilizations. But the methods they were using would have been considered war crimes if used against any conventional enemy. Your people are becoming something new, Kristen Seven observed. The patterns of their combat behavior don't match any known psychological profiles. Kevin nodded grimly. We're adapting to fight an enemy that exists outside normal reality. The question is whether we'll be able to adapt back when the war is over. On Kepler 442c, Captain Jake Morrison made the discovery that would change everything. Deep in the ancient prison, his team found the control center that had originally contained the Devourers. But more importantly, they found records of what had happened to the civilization that built it. Lisa, you need to see this, Jake called to Dr. Harper. The builders didn't just imprison the Devourers. They imprisoned themselves too. Lisa studied the ancient recordings with growing understanding. They won their war by becoming something that could fight the Devourers on equal terms. But when the fighting was over, they realized they had become too dangerous to exist alongside normal civilizations. Ryan Torres discovered the most disturbing part of the records. Captain, they didn't just lock themselves away. They created a failsafe. If anyone ever released the Devourers again, the prison would automatically activate protocols to deal with whoever was fighting them. Amy Chun looked up from her communications station with alarm. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the prison complex. Something is activating that's been dormant for 50,000 years. Jake realized with growing horror what was happening. The ancient prison wasn't just a containment facility. It was a test. The builders had created a system that would judge whether their successors were worthy of survival, and if those successors proved to be as dangerous as the original builders, the prison would activate measures to contain them too. Get me a direct line to Earth Command, Jake ordered. We need to warn them about what's coming. But as he spoke, energy readings spiked throughout the galaxy. Every world that had been touched by either Devourers or human weapons began to pulse, with the same ancient power. The Builder's failsafe was activating, and it was designed to judge not just the Devourers, but anyone who fought them using similar methods. Humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for the day they might need to become monsters. Now, they were about to discover that becoming a monster was only the first test. The real question was whether they could remain human enough to deserve survival. When the monsters were finally defeated, the galaxy was about to learn that the ancient builders had planned for every possibility, including the rise of a species that might be just as dangerous as the evil they were fighting. Admiral Tony Blake stood on the bridge of the Defiance as reality warped around them. The ancient prison's failsafe system had activated across the galaxy, creating energy fields that threatened to tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. Through the viewports, he could see stars flickering like dying candles as the builder's final judgment began. Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from every human fleet, reported Lieutenant Commander Kate Murphy. Her voice was strained as she tried to make sense of readings that violated known physics. The energy fields are affecting all ships that carry our new weapons. It's like the prison system is scanning us. Tony knew what the scans would find. Humanity had become exactly what the ancient builders had feared. In their desperate war against the Devourers, they had transformed themselves into something that might be just as dangerous to the galaxy. On Kepler 442c, Captain Jake Morrison raced through the prison's control center with his team. Ancient systems that had slept for 50,000 years were coming online, judging the species that had accidentally awakened both the Devourers and their own final test. The builders left detailed records, Dr. Lisa Harper called out as she studied. The alien database. They knew this day would come. They knew that eventually someone would release the Devourers, and they built this system to judge whoever fought them. Ryan Torres worked frantically at the prison's main controls. Captain, I can see the judgment criteria. The system is measuring Our weapons, our tactics, our psychological modifications. It's comparing us to the original builders. Amy Chun monitored communications from across the galaxy. Captain, human forces are reporting massive system failures. Our modified ships and weapons are being disabled by the energy fields, but the Devourers are being affected too. Jake realized what was happening. The ancient builders had created the ultimate failsafe. If a species proved capable of fighting the Devourers using methods similar to their own, the prison would activate protocols to contain both threats. The builders had been willing to sacrifice themselves to protect the galaxy, and they expected any successor species to make the same choice. In the depths of space, Commander Nick Powell led his Void Walkers in one final battle, but this time, they weren't fighting just the Devourers. The prison's energy fields were creating manifestations of the original builders, testing whether humanity deserved to survive their own transformation. Stay together, Nick ordered his squad as reality. Twisted around them. These aren't real enemies. They're projections created by the prison system. It's testing our resolve. Sergeant Beth Clark fired her quantum disruptor at a shadow that moved like liquid hate. The weapon that had been so effective against Devourers barely scratched the manifestation. Sir, our weapons aren't working properly. The energy fields are neutralizing our modifications. Lieutenant Don Miller faced something that looked like a mirror image of himself, but wrong in ways that hurt to perceive. Commander, I think these projections are showing us what we've become, what we might turn into if we continue down this path. Nick understood. The Builder's test wasn't about military capability, it was about moral choice. Would humanity choose to preserve themselves even if it meant becoming a threat to others? Or would they choose to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, as the Builders had done? Dr. Elena Vasquez worked desperately in her lunar laboratory as the prison's energy fields began affecting Earth itself. Her life's work, the weapons, that had given humanity a chance against the Devourers, were being systematically disabled by technology that existed outside normal spacetime. General, we're losing everything, she reported to Rachel Foster. The quantum disruptors are failing. The dimensional weapons are shutting down. Even our psychological conditioning programs are being reversed. General Foster watched reports flood in from across human space. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. The prison system is giving us a choice. We can keep our weapons and become permanently changed, locked away like the Devourers. Or we can give them up and trust that we've done enough damage to stop the ancient threat. On the Zilani homeworld, Dr. Kevin Martinez felt the energy fields wash over him. But instead of fear, he felt understanding. The ancient builders had faced the same choice that humanity was facing now. They had chosen to sacrifice themselves rather than risk becoming what they fought. Kristen 7, your people need to know, Kevin said urgently. The humans aren't the real threat. The prison system is testing whether any species can fight ultimate evil without becoming evil themselves. It's a test that the builders themselves failed. The crystalline being's features showed confusion. What do you mean they failed? They succeeded in defeating the Devourers, but they became something worse in the process. That's why they built this failsafe. They wanted to make sure that no other species would make the same mistake they did. Captain Alex Stone made the hardest decision of his military career. As the Reaper phased through dimensions that were being systematically sealed by the prison's energy fields, he gave the order that would end humanity's secret war. All ships, stand down, he commanded. Disable all modified weapons and systems. Return to normal space immediately. Lieutenant Sarah Kim looked at him in shock. Sir, if we do that, we'll be defenseless against any remaining Devourers. Maybe, Alex replied. But if we don't, we'll become something that the galaxy needs to be defended against. The Builder's test isn't about winning. It's about knowing when to stop. Across human space, fleet commanders made the same difficult choice. Ships that had been modified to fight outside normal reality returned to conventional spacetime. Weapons that could erase matter from existence were powered down. Soldiers whose minds had been conditioned to think Like predators began the painful process of remembering how to be human on Kepler 442c. Jake Morrison placed his hand on the prison's central control interface. The ancient system had been waiting 50,000 years for someone to make the choice that its builders couldn't make for themselves. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Ryan Torres asked. "If we shut down our weapons, we might not be able to stop the remaining Devourers." Jake thought about Lieutenant Maya Johnson and the other Void Walkers slowly losing their humanity to fight an inhuman enemy. He thought about the weapons that could erase history itself. He thought about a galaxy that had learned to fear humanity almost as much as they feared the ancient evil. "Yes," he said simply, "we're sure." The prison system accepted humanity's choice. Across the galaxy, the energy fields began to recede. Human weapons and modifications were permanently disabled, but something else happened too. The remaining Devourers, weakened by their battles with humanity's impossible weapons, found themselves being drawn back into the prison systems that had held them for so long. The ancient builders had planned for this too. The prison wasn't just a test of moral character. It was also a trap that could only be activated by a species willing to sacrifice their ultimate weapons for the greater good. Ambassador Claire Watson stood before the Galactic Council one final time. The assembled aliens looked at her with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Your species passed a test that destroyed its creators," High Chancellor Vex observed. "The Builders' records show that they chose to keep their weapons rather than give them up. They became prisoners of their own power," Claire nodded. "We made a different choice. We chose to remain human rather than become something that could fight monsters forever. But the victory came with a price. Humanity had voluntarily quarantined itself from the rest of the galaxy. The knowledge of how to create weapons that could fight ultimate evil was too dangerous to share. Earth became a watching post, monitoring the ancient prison and standing ready to make the same sacrifice again if necessary. Jake Morrison, no longer entirely human but not yet entirely something else, took his place as the first guardian of the ancient prison. He would watch over both the defeated Devourers and the dangerous knowledge that humanity had chosen to abandon. The galaxy was safe, but humanity had become something that existed between worlds. They were protectors who couldn't be protected, guardians who had saved everyone by accepting that they could never again be part of what they had saved. In the end, they had proven that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop fighting, even when you have the power to fight forever.